part of it is dependent, it's just math, it's dependent on the value of the commodities themselves. We've been in a downturn in terms of commodity prices really since peaking in 07, 08. So, I mean, first part is the lower commodity values go. I mean, that much more of it you need to export to hit that target. We all know that there's a really heavy reliance on West Coast shipments, and there are real limitations to what the end-to-end supply chain can handle at any given point in time. I touched on the presentation earlier, and once again, it's function of markets and values, but there are significant times of the year where a lot of horsepower to move grain through the supply chain goes underutilized or unutilized, and that needs to be considered as well. You have to be able to work with what you've got as well. I think the supply chain is going to become more and more efficient over time, and you've seen that in the size of the spotting program that CN has delivered at peak period. It looks very similar over the course of the winter as well. Everybody's gotten more efficient, so we're going to see sequential, progressive improvement in the efficiency of the assets in the supply chain over time. Big investments being made at the West Coast. There's a big difference between nameplate capacity, building capacity at the waterfront, and being able to fully exploit that capacity. There's only so many trains that can find their way to the North Shore on a given basis to open up capacity, let's say, for all the existing grain infrastructure, but not only grain, but other commodities like coal and fertilizer. Everything wants to point that way. So I guess from that perspective, it's got to fit. Great agri-food has got to fit into this space where it and everything else is trying to push its way into a really constrained system. And even if those big projects get done, but once those projects get done, you can only think about the growth over that period of time. Maybe the Fraser Bridge gets done eventually or whatever, but you get 5-10 years down the road and think about the increase in production that's occurred. Call it 2.5% compounded over 10 years. In year one, it's 1.25 million tons in Western Canada, so do the math. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. So unless something really changes with markets and it's more profitable from a grain handling and trading margin perspective to push more grain through the eastern and southern supply chains, I mean, that's also going to be a governor on what the overall value of goods can be moving through the supply chain at any given point in time. And even on, we're going to increase canola processing probably over time here, right? You had Camrose come on a couple of years ago. ADM increased their crush at Lloydminster. It's only a matter of time before more of that wants to come online, but even then, that also is increasingly pointed into the West Coast supply chain. So